It felt like everything went against Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes at the Dutch Grand Prix this weekend. So let's take a look at the main reasons why Lewis Hamilton didn't win the race on Sunday. So it really started off in qualifying. On the final runs in Q3, Sergio Perez spun in the last corner, and it meant that Lewis Hamilton and a number of other drivers couldn't get their final Q3 laps in. Lewis was up in Sector 1 and I think he was slightly down in Sector 2, so possibly pole might have been too hard for him to achieve, but he ended up starting the race in 4th, and definitely 3rd could have been on the cards. And if he was able to maintain that position off the start, that would have really helped him in the race. Let's not forget, by the time that Lewis managed to get past Carlos Sainz, he was more than 6 seconds behind Charles Leclerc and even further back behind Max Verstappen. So that's already handing Max and Lewis Hamilton's rivals a big advantage. Then Lewis had a tight battle with Sergio Perez, not able to do it on his first attempt, Sergio going deep and running him out of the road. But it was all hard, fair racing, very reminiscent of their battle in Abu Dhabi. But on the second attempt, Lewis did manage to get through, but it was then held up by Sebastian Vettel, who was coming out the pits on cold tyres. Sergio Perez gave Lewis a bit of a look, put his nose into the third corner, and Sebastian Vettel taking a number of corners and seeing a number of blue flags before he finally let Lewis Hamilton and Sergio Perez through. Lewis Hamilton managed to hold on to the place ahead of Sergio Perez. It said on the commentary that Lewis Hamilton lost 3 seconds or more, and again that's just more time that's starting to add up, giving time to Max Verstappen, and Sebastian Vettel got a 5-second time penalty for ignoring blue flags. And then it was an odd situation with Yuki Tsunoda and AlphaTauri. Yuki Tsunoda had come out the pits and was complaining about a loose wheel or something not feeling right with the steering. So he slowed, looked like they was going to pull the car off to the side, but then carried on going. Yuki Tsunoda then came into the pits, the yellow flags were ended and it was green flag racing again. AlphaTauri then checking Yuki Tsunoda's steering wheel and changing all the tyres, but then he went back out and stopped on track, and that brought out the virtual safety car. Why AlphaTauri sent the car back out, I do not know. They're not allowed to do that because that's deemed an unsafe release, and the teams can receive heavy fines. Typically they don't normally receive race penalties anymore, it's the team that is fined. But that virtual safety car, while Lewis Hamilton was charging down Max Verstappen, allowed Max a cheap pit stop and to get out ahead of Lewis. So that handed the track position back to Max Verstappen after making his second stop under the virtual safety car. And then later on in the race, Valtteri Bottas pulls aside with a reliability issue, bringing out the full safety car. This allowed Max to pit, but the 2 Mercedes drivers stayed out an extra lap. The 2 Mercedes drivers got ahead of Max. Now on the next lap, all the cars had to go through the pit lane, and this is where George Russell made the call that he wanted to go onto softs and was willing to give up that track position to Max, which put Lewis in first on mediums, Max on softs, and then George in third on softs. Now, Mercedes have been pretty good on strategy, generally making the right calls, but I think they shouldn't really have split the strategy here. They either needed to leave George Russell between Lewis and Max, giving Lewis a little bit of defence, although likely Max would have still had the speed to get past anyway, or they needed to pit both drivers and hope that Max either had an issue or just settle for second and third, which is more likely what they were going to end up with anyway. But it's difficult to pit from the lead and give up that track position, but with hindsight that was the right decision because of course Lewis ended up finishing off the podium completely and in 4th place. But I think this race has got to be deemed a success for Mercedes after a very poor race in Spa, everyone just losing out massively to Max Verstappen being ridiculously quick and able to win the race in 14th. Mercedes were right there on the pace, they were good in qualifying, which they've generally struggled with this year, and they were quicker than every car bar one, which was Max. They were quicker than Sergio Perez, they were quicker than the 2 Ferraris. So this weekend's got to be deemed a big positive for Mercedes. This might be one of the last real chances that they've got to win a race. It's really suiting their car. I think it's Monza next weekend, and that's definitely going to be a difficult race for Mercedes, with their rivals having a much better top speed. Something that Lewis could really work on is his race restarts. I feel like he should probably use the trick of going right up to the start finish line, going slow and then bolting for it, because that wouldn't allow Max to slipstream him. Yes, it doesn't give him the opportunity to maybe break ahead and get a second gap or more, but it would at least mean that he wouldn't get overtaken straight away and just take a little bit of life out of his rival's tyres. But in this case, Max was able to get him on the first straight, getting that nice slingshot out of the last corner, and Lewis was really a sit and duck for the other cars. But I don't want to take anything away from Max or Red Bull. They had the pace. Max delivered in qualifying to give himself pole, and they had a quick car and made all of the right strategy calls. And when you've got an advantage in the race, you know, a sizable 5-10 second gap, it allows you that little bit of buffer to make the right calls. Mercedes always kind of on the back foot because they got unlucky with the safety cars and the events that happened in the race. But really, Max and Red Bull had that buffer that allowed them to make the right strategy calls. So it was a good win for Max. It wasn't really a straightforward race. Had there not been the safety cars and the issues with Yuki and Valtteri Bottas, it was looking like Max was probably going to have to stop again and make the overtakes on the two Mercedes drivers. He'd already made an overtake on George Russell earlier on the race, and it was pretty easy for him because that Red Bull is rapid in a straight line and the Mercedes is pretty slow. Let me know in the comments below what you think of Lewis Hamilton's race. Do you think he was unlucky, or do you think Max deserved that win? If you enjoyed the video, please consider dropping a like and subscribe for more fun content just like this. And if you haven't already, why don't you check out my 2022 mid-season review so you can get a recap on all the teams and drivers and how they've fared so far this season, and a look ahead at the remainder of the season. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.